because there was this footage that appeared, I guess overnight, of Israel blowing up an entire village in southern Lebanon. What do you make of that?
So I've seen the footage. I cannot speak to what their intent was or what they were trying to accomplish, what their targets were. I don't know what they were. Obviously, we do not want to see entire villages destroyed. We don't want to see civilian homes destroyed. We don't want to see civilian buildings destroyed. We understand that Hezbollah does operate at times from underneath civilian homes, inside civilian homes. We've seen footage that has emerged over the course of the past 2 weeks of rockets and other military weapons held in civilian homes. So Israel does have a right to go after those legitimate targets, but they need to do so in a way that protects civilian infrastructure, protects civilians.
All right, I'm not sure I understand. I cannot speak to what their intent was or what they were trying to accomplish. Isn't it pretty clear that what their intent was, and whether they had a specific target in mind or not? Blowing up an entire village, that seems to be pretty self-revelatory.
I don't know what was in those buildings. I don't know what was potentially underneath those buildings. That's when I say I can't speak to what they were trying to accomplish.
Well, have you asked?
We have been in contact with them about this this very incident. I don't have a report back. I don't have a report back to share today, but we have been in contact with them about this incident.
Well, okay, maybe not a report, but what did they say? Did they say, yeah, we're looking into it, or did they say, no, we did it and we're? I don't have a
readout of those conversations yet.
All right, thank you.
Just on this strike on Nabatea that killed 16 people, including the mayor. The caretaker prime minister said Israel intentionally targeted a meeting of the municipal council, to discuss the city's service and relief situation to aid people displaced by the Israeli campaign. What's the administration's understanding on that, and do you find it acceptable to strike such a meeting coordinating aid?
So I can't speak to this strike. I don't know what it is that they were targeting. I would direct you to them to speak to it.
Would you find it acceptable to strike a meeting that was coordinating
So if
aid?
they were targeting civilians, obviously that would not be acceptable. I don't know that that's what they're doing, which is why I can't comment on this strike, because I don't know what their intent was, what they were trying to accomplish, and ultimately what they did accomplish. But obviously, if it was a meeting of civilians to coordinate aid and they were intentionally targeting that, of course that would be unacceptable. But that is the type of thing we'd want to see verified.
There's been several strikes. Obviously, there's the village of Kana, which the whole village was just about destroyed. And there's Nabatea here, where they killed the mayor during this meeting. And so I have a hard time understanding why you can't comment. I mean, you told them yesterday. Well, yesterday was specifically on Beirut. And by the way, today they bombed a place in southern Beirut. So I mean, sometimes you say. You can comment. Other times you don't want to comment. I mean, where are you here?
So I can comment on an overall policy, and I can comment on a specific strike when we have verifiable information about what it is that happened, what they were trying to accomplish, whether they made a mistake or not, whether they accomplished their objective, whether their objective was a legitimate one. And obviously that varies from strike to strike. There are times, for example, with the World Central Kitchen strike, where we know obviously that they were striking civilian humanitarian workers, and it's very clear that something went terribly wrong. There are other instances where they strike a site where there are terrorists who are embedded there and there's civilian harm, and you have to ask questions about how that happened, whether they knew what they were doing. And then there are other strikes where the picture can be very mixed. So that's why it's always difficult to comment on individual strikes when you are in the fog of war and don't have always complete information. I can tell you as a general principle, of course we want to see civilians protected, and we want to see Israel do everything within its power to minimize civilian harm. That applies to Gaza. It applies to the war against Hezbollah as well.
But it's specifically on the strike this morning or today in southern Beirut. Yesterday you said, you're opposed to bombing, general bombing or massive bombing or what have you in Beirut. Today they struck the target in southern Beirut.
So they do
okay with that? Or?
So they do have the right to target members of Hezbollah. They have the right to target terrorists who are committed to the destruction of Israel, who are committed to death, to murdering civilians. What I made clear yesterday, what you have heard us say, is that we are opposed to the bombing campaign in the way that we saw it proceeding over the past few weeks. We're opposed to the near daily strikes, and sometimes multiple strikes a day in densely populated areas in Beirut. That's what we saw for a course of 10 days to 2 weeks, and we made clear to the government of Israel that we were opposed to that intense daily bombardment of Beirut, and we saw it dialed back significantly. It's not to say that there can't be some strikes that are legitimate, but the type of bombing that we saw happening day in, day out in Beirut, that was causing civilian harm, that was causing mass civilian displacement, that was destabilizing to populations inside Lebanon, is something we were clearly opposed to, and we made clear to them.
Yeah, but you made that clear several days after it got reduced. Or you didn't say it when it was happening. You weren't saying that.
We did make it clear to them privately while it was happening, and we saw a change in behavior after we made it clear. There is sometimes we say this to you, and I think you don't believe us that we tell them things privately. This is an example. We told them privately this at a point last week, well before we said it publicly. We made clear we wanted to see a change in behavior. We did see a change in behavior. It's not to make any predictions about what they will do in the future. They're a sovereign country that make their own decisions, but we made clear to them that we oppose the campaign that they were conducting, and we've seen it scaled back significantly. Yeah. So, Tom.
Thank you.
But I will come back to you.
I wanted to return to Nabatea and the mayor who's been killed in the strike. Apparently, killed 16 people. I mean, this is described as a Hezbollah-affiliated mayor. The attack was on a official Lebanese state building. I mean, if that's on the face of it, the reason for this attack that he's Hezbollah affiliated, is that a justifiable target in your view?
I don't want to comment on the face of things. I want to be able to comment when I have full verified information, which I don't have at this point.
I'm asking a question. I mean, you said earlier that Israel has the right to target members of Hezbollah. I mean, would you regard a Hezbollah affiliated mayor of a village as a member of Hezbollah that Israel has the right to target?
Again, I don't even have confirmation that he's a Hezbollah-affiliated mayor. I'm taking your version of the story. Before I comment on the specifics of a strike or deal with that kind of hypothetical, I would want to know the full particulars, which I don't have at this point.
I mean, and the reason I asked the question is just about policy, because obviously a lot of this is using American-supplied arms. So does Israel have the right to target anyone who has an affiliation with Hezbollah? Because this is a group that has a clear military side to it, and it also is deeply embedded in the state. It's the most dominant force in Lebanon. It has civil servants, it has MPs. Would you regard all of those as legitimate targets?
They have the right to target militants. They have the right to target those engaged in terrorism, those involved with supporting terrorism, with financing terrorism, and helping carry out terrorist attacks. I think that's clear under an international humanitarian law. They don't have the right to carry out attacks on civilians. That's also clear.
Okay, so that sounds like.
But hold on.
Right.
When you want to get to the next iteration of looking at an individual person, you have to know the specific facts about the individual person.
I'm not actually asking you that about an individual person. I'm just asking. It sounds from what you're saying as though there is a line in the, civil servants or MPs who some countries do not designate the political wing of Hezbollah as a terrorist organisation, as I think the US does. But it sounds as though you are putting a line there and saying.
I will not either agree or disagree with your characterization. I'm going to stand on the words that I just outlined for myself.
I just want to expand this because I think it does go to what the strategy is here, what your strategy is as the primary military backer of Israel in terms of this operation, because you have moved from a strategy just a few weeks ago, which was get the residents of Israel back to the north, get the residents in Lebanon back to the south. Basically, that was your primary objective, and then rolling into that, trying to get 1701, implemented as part of a short truce where you can get people talking. But you're now way beyond that, because you're now in a situation where you're saying, you want a new president elected. You've said it's up to the Lebanese people to break the stranglehold that Hezbollah has on the Lebanese government. You weren't saying any of these things a month ago.
That is absolutely not true.
Okay,
just as a factual matter, we have made clear, going back even before. Tom, let me correct the record because it's really important.
Yeah.
We have made clear going back before October 7th that we wanted to see the Lebanese.
Yeah.
Parliament break this political deadlock and elect a new president. This is not a position. It's not something new that we are trying to accomplish.
But you weren't connecting it to an Israeli military operation, which has invaded Lebanon, which is bombing Beirut. And now these things are wrapped together. So I'm asking you about the strategy for the military campaign that you're the key supplier of, because this sounds like, and given what Benjamin Netanyahu has said about, he wants the Lebanese to rise up against Hezbollah, and you're saying break the stranglehold. This is now in the context of a military operation. So I'm asking the question, are you creating these conditions for the Israelis to stop? That you want, basically, Hezbollah removed as both a military and political force in Lebanon?
Of course we want to see Hezbollah not exercise political power inside Lebanon. They're a terrorist organization. They're a terrorist organization that is held. Hold on, Tom, let me finish. You had a long build up to the question. They're a terrorist organization that has held the Lebanese people hostage, that has killed, murdered civilians inside Lebanon. So of course we don't want to see them involved in governance inside Lebanon. And that is not anything new. I see your hand up. Let me just finish. That is not anything new. That has been the policy of the United States going back years and years, decades, in fact. And it has also been the policy of the United States that we want to see them elect a new president going back for some time. Now, we do want to see people return to their homes. We ultimately want to see a diplomatic resolution, but it needs to be a diplomatic resolution that actually will produce that hand down for a second. I'll come to you. That will produce that outcome. Because we saw for the year after October 7th, these tit-for-tat attacks going back and forth across the blue line, and the result was tens of thousands of people being displaced for their homes. So we want to see at the end of this military campaign, this diplomatic resolution that will get people home. Yes, we also want to see a change in the Lebanese government. That means Lebanon can elect a new president. That has been our position for some time. It's not something that started when the first Israeli forces crossed the border.
But I'm just challenging that because, yes, you've always said that about, Lebanon's been in this crisis where it hasn't had a president for 2 years, and obviously you don't want Hezbollah in Lebanon. But you weren't saying, we think the way to do that is to bomb Lebanon into this solution, which now...
I have not said that
No,
today.
you haven't said
So
that.
just to be
But what
clear,
I'm saying is, I'm
if
trying
you
to
want to
get-
use words, use the
I'm
words that
trying
I've
to ask-
used.
I'm trying to I'm asking you to disentangle these two things because I'm saying to you, is it a condition of the end of this military operation in Lebanon that these things are achieved, that there is a new president, that Hezbollah are basically disempowered completely, both militarily and political? Because you weren't saying this the way to achieve that more than 4 weeks ago. You weren't saying the way to achieve that involved a military campaign. But now we are in a situation where the two things, as far as I can tell, are bound together, and you're not distinguishing between them, as far as I can see.
Let me just go back to something that we said immediately after Israel launched this military campaign, which is that we are fully cognizant that military campaigns can at times create space for diplomacy. Long history of that. They can also produce the opposite effect. And we've seen military campaigns in Lebanon where Israel has crossed the border with the intent of a limited campaign, and it's turned to something completely different. And we're aware of the possibility of that scenario as well. I'm not going to make any predictions about what will happen. I'm telling you what we're going to try to achieve. Ultimately, when you come to asking about the military objectives, that's a question for Israel, not for us. I can tell you what it is that we want to see happen, and that's what I've made clear.
And just lastly, I know other people want to come in, but it's just the point is, the president said right at the start of all this, don't repeat the mistakes we made after 9/11. We saw what happened in Iraq with the attempt at regime change, and 10 years later you have ISIS. And so I asked this question because critics of what's happening now in Lebanon with the Israeli military campaign that's happening would say, well, look, this is just another regime change attempt. And to try and do that through a campaign of bombing has been proven, especially in the Middle East, to be completely futile and counterproductive.
So
and yeah, you seem to be, you're behind this. You're in with this now.
we are not interested in regime change. We are interested in the people of Lebanon electing a president and breaking the deadlock that a terrorist organization. I don't know how I could be any more clear than that. That's what we've been interested in for years. It's what we continue to be interested in. It continues to be what we push for in our diplomatic engagements.
Just want to also follow up on Heba's question regarding the outcome of this war. You've been saying it on many occasions that the outcome should be the full implementation of 1701. And as the fighting goes on, we see ourselves further away from achieving that by military means. I remember when I asked you about Naim Qasim's statement that he is willing to go with Berri, the Lebanese Speaker of the Parliament, that you were saying that, yes, we want it ultimately, but now it's time for Israel to attack Hezbollah. Hezbollah is still fighting, still firing missiles, things threatening to go beyond control in southern Lebanon. We've seen yesterday the Israeli military just, I don't know what the word to describe that, but a whole village went into nothing in southern Lebanon. Do you feel that maybe this approach of you, allowing Israel this window, is actually dragging you more and more into something that you don't really want?
So, first of all, as you've heard me say before, and I'm going to repeat it again because I think it's always an important reminder, Israel is a sovereign country that makes its own decisions. And we impress upon them what we believe the best outcome is for their security interests, for the security interests of neighboring countries, for the security interests of the broader region. But these are decisions that Israel ultimately makes, and we will intervene with them to make clear what we think is the outcome that they ought to pursue. When it comes to what happens next, obviously, we want to see a change in the political situation in Lebanon because we want to see them elect a president. We've made that clear. But the part of the question that I'm having a little bit of trouble with is it removes any agency from Lebanese political actors and the Lebanese political system and puts it all in the United States. It is ultimately up to the people in Lebanon, the Lebanese government, to break through the dysfunction that has plagued it and elect a new president, something that we have made clear, something the international community has made clear that they want to see for some time. It is up to the Lebanese people to break the stranglehold that that Hezbollah has had on the Lebanese government. We can do our part, other countries can do our part, but the countries in the region play a role in this too. Lebanese people play a role in this too. So what we want to see happen is Hezbollah degraded, Hezbollah pull back, Hezbollah finally meet the obligations that they committed to in 2006 and have never fulfilled. It's important to remind people of that because it is an important part of the story of how we got here today. And we're going to continue to work to try to achieve that outcome.
But Matt, yeah, Israel is a sovereign state, of course, and can take its own position, but you are providing them with weapons. And you did before put restrictions on countries, Ukraine is an example, that you provide them with a military aid in the middle of a war, and you put restrictions and limitation on how they use this military, especially targeting inside Russian territory. Why don't you apply the same here with Israel?
Every conflict is different. We continue to engage with Israel about the need to protect civilians, to minimize civilian harm, and that will continue.
Thank you, Matt. I want to follow up on that strike in southern Beirut today. Matt, there has been a pattern since October 8th that the day you say something, that you oppose something, the Israelis do something totally the opposite the second day. What happened yesterday, or the last 48 hours, the Prime Minister, the Lebanese Prime Minister, said, we have guarantees that they will not strike Beirut anymore. And obviously this was the message in Lebanon, that these guarantees, the US gave these guarantees. You said that yesterday, that you opposed these strikes on Beirut. Kirby, I think, in his briefing said that. I mean, does that concern you? This is the US credibility. I'm not talking about whether this strike was against Hezbollah or against the messaging, your credibility, the US as a mediator, especially now in Lebanon, because everybody is looking at you, you are the one who can pose a ceasefire at least.
What concerns us ultimately is outcomes. And we involve the United States in trying to generate the best possible outcome in every situation. And so when you say we made this clear yesterday, I can tell you we made it clear some number of days before I stood here at this podium and said it yesterday. And it wasn't me saying at this podium that ultimately led to the intensity of the strikes in Beirut going down. It was our direct, quiet intervention with the government of Israel that I believe led to the intensity of that campaign being dialed back. We are going to continue to make that clear to the government of Israel, just as we're going to continue to make clear to them that ultimately we want to see full implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701. That includes the IDF withdrawing back into the borders of Israel and includes Hezbollah withdrawing back above the Litani River. That is what we continue to drive for, and it is ultimately those outcomes that we're most interested in achieving.
On the strike in the south today, the village, the destruction of an entire village, also the strike in Nabatieh. By the way, the building belongs to the, I think, the Interior Ministry, because this is a municipality. Also, you said you support a limited military operation. Is there a shared definition for this limited military operation between you and the Israeli? Because I think the understanding in Lebanon that what's happening now, it's like a scorched earth policy to create a safe zone in the south. So it seems to be in effect now. And do you support that this will support the Israeli later in their negotiations with Hezbollah or with the Lebanese government? So
what we support are limited incursions to attack Hezbollah, to degrade Hezbollah infrastructure, not to target civilians, not to destroy civilian homes, not to wipe villages out. We do support campaigns to take on Hezbollah because for the past year, we've seen Hezbollah refuse to stand down on its attacks that had led to Israeli response attacks that ultimately displaced tens of thousands of people on both sides of the border. That has been an untenable situation for the people of both countries. But ultimately, what we want to see is implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701, because that would get us back to a place where those residents can return to their homes.
is there any political engagement, any U.S. official visiting Beirut next week? Do you have anything?
I don't have any announcements to make about travel next week. Stay tuned. We'll make announcements as we have them, but I don't have any to announce today. Go ahead.
$1
billion a year and so on. That was done during the Obama administration. But let me ask you in principle, if a country that you provide aid to breaks the law, regardless of what kind of agreement you sign with them, can't you break away from that agreement, say that they have basically, grossly and fundamentally broken the law or the terms of the agreement?
Yeah, we have obligations under our own laws to ensure that countries that are the recipients of U.S. military assistance don't block the delivery of humanitarian assistance, don't impede the delivery of humanitarian assistance, and we take steps to ensure that we enforce that law. We have obligations under U.S. law to ensure that our weapons are used in compliance with international humanitarian law.
So in principle, you can declare that agreement to be null and void if it does not fit into your.
Saeed, I'm not going to get too far into parsing the law from here, as I'm not a lawyer, but yes, we have the ability to enforce U.S. law, of course.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
What?
You really think that you have the ability to declare the null and void, the MOU that was signed?
I did not say null and void. We have the ability
No, that's what he said, and you said,
I said
I'm not going to get into it.
So
I don't think you do.
I'm not,
I think you're
hold
walking
on. I'm
a
not
real
going to get into
fine line here, if that's what you think.
I'm not going to get into parsing all the provisions of law, including the provisions of law that require us to provide military assistance, and the provisions of law that require us to ensure that that people comply with the Foreign Assistance
Well,
Act
you need to rule in or rule it out.
requirements.
Because if you,
No,
so it could
this
be
goes back.
somewhere in the middle.
This goes
then.
back to the conversation that you and I had at the beginning of this, which
Yeah,
I know.
I
which
know, but you
which
just,
I know.
you just,
No,
but
no.
you just left the door open to you saying that you could declare, that the administration could declare the MOU that was signed, that took effect in 2019,
so I very
and
much
is valid until
I-
2028, could be
I
declared null and void.
I very much did
I
not.
don't,
So you
okay.
should never.
I don't think that's correct, but that's what you
and
implied.
That is not at all what I implied or said.
Okay, thank you.
Continue. Also,